Glengarry Glen Ross, 1992. What was the single greatest expense making Glengarry Glen Ross? Why did Alin Arkin turn down the role of George Aronow twice? And what solution did he come up with to allow him to take the role? What nickname did the actors give this movie during production? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
You see this watch? That watch costs more than your car. I made $970,000 last year. How much you make? You see, pal, that's who I am, and you're nothing. Nice guy? I don't give a shit. Good father? Fuck you, go home and play with your kids. You want to work here? Close. You think this is abuse? You think this is abuse, you cocksucker? If you can't take this, how can you take the abuse you get on a sit? You don't like it? Leave. I can go out there tonight. The materials you got make myself $15,000 tonight in 2 hours. Can you? Can you? Go and do likewise. AIDA. Get mad, you sons of bitches. Get mad. You want to know what it takes to sell real estate? It takes brass balls to sell real estate. Go and do likewise, gents. The money's out there. You pick it up, it's yours. You don't, I got no sympathy for you. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 227th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and if you happen to have a door-to-door salesperson visit your home, then tell them, too, about Back Look Cinema. Have you ever watched a movie that had such an impact on you for the acting alone that you can't stop thinking about it? Glengarry Glen Ross is one such movie for me. It is so thoroughly well cast and so masterfully acted that it becomes very easy to slip into the world that they've created, the world of the salesperson. Obviously, if you've been in any sales situation, whether it's as a car salesperson or an author selling their book or real estate, as in this film, then you might understand the pressure regarding the business. It's this pressure that drives our main characters, and something I had a little understanding of when I first saw this movie on cable, because it was around that time that I had been sucked into a multi-level marketing scheme, life insurance. Sales is totally different now. I remember back in the day, salespeople would come to your house and try to sell you Mary Kay cosmetics or Kirby vacuum cleaners or Amway products, but I hadn't had a visit from a salesperson in decades. But I do still see the pink Mary Kay Cadillacs. So I guess there's still some home visits going on. Write in and let me know if you've ever been a salesperson or been visited by a salesperson, or even if you've been invited to a sales party at friends@backlookcinema.com. Anyway, like I said, sales is different. A lot of it is done online. In this film, they talk a lot about leads and the way they collect leads. And for the record, leads are the people that are likely to buy whatever product that the salesperson happens to be selling. It's lists of people. It's based on demographics. It's based on where you're living at. It's all of this data that we are concerned about now with social media and websites that collecting all your data. The cookies on a website are like, every time you go to a new website, even on my website there, I don't know. Well, on my website, there's like a privacy notice, but on most other websites, there are their cookies, like do accept these cookies, and the cookies are the little bits of data that they collect about your visit, what you're clicking on. Or you notice, like, when you click on an ad on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any place else, what happens is that you start seeing ads for that product. Even if you've already bought that product, you start seeing more and more ads for that very same product that you bought. That's how leads are generated nowadays. But before, you had agencies going out and they would put out questionnaires, and people would fill these out. These questionnaires would be in magazines and newspapers or some such thing. Or if you like, anytime you filled out information for a contest, these contests weren't there to try to give you money, even though they're legitimate contests and they're real prizes. But the real purpose of the contest is to collect your information, and they would turn that information, that data that you willingly gave these people, into leads. And then next thing you know, you're getting calls from salespeople. Now, I haven't actually had people come to my door, but I am getting a lot of calls. I am getting a lot of calls to get me to sell property, to sell. Like, I don't really own any property outright, but people think that I do. So they're trying to get me to sell this property that I'm only a partial owner of. So I get a lot of those calls, but I'm not getting any calls of people trying to sell me, like specifically sell me products. But the people who are calling me, they're in that high stakes sales game that this movie is all about. So, like I said, if you've ever been in sales, this movie is specifically going to pique your interest. And if you just love acting, or you like the way story is crafted, then this movie is something that you're going to love. Now to the opening credits of Glengarry Glen Ross. Ricky Roma, Shelley the Machine Levine, George Aronow, and Dave Moss work out of a high-pressure Chicago real estate office desperately trying to sell property in Florida. Working on commission means that if they don't sell, they don't eat, or pay rent, or drive, or anything. Their very identities are tied to their ability to sell. To them, a man who couldn't close a deal or make a sale was no man at all. The stakes get even higher when a high-ranking sales manager shows up to present them with a contest. The first prize is a Cadillac. The second prize is a set of cheap steak knives. The third prize is you're fired. Released October 2nd, 1992 by New Line Cinema, Zupnik Cinema Group 2, and GGR. It grossed over $10 million in the U.S. and Canada on a reported budget of $12 million. Now, if you notice, this is not good. This is not good at all. Not even close. And I didn't even expect this. This was a hard flop. And it is disjointing to come across this information. If you adjust this for inflation, then that would mean that it grossed $23 million. And the budget of this movie would have been $12 million. I'm sorry, not 12. $28 million. The budget would have been $28 million. So that's a hard reality to face. And I can't tell you why. And then I don't even think that I was cognizant of this movie when it was in theaters. I only ran across it when it was on cable. And I just so happened to see it. And I don't even know why I sat down and watched it. It's in 1992. I don't know if that would have been my type of film. I think maybe that I liked the actors that was in it, or there was something else that captivated me about it. I don't know, but I did watch it. Or maybe I've heard people talk about how good the film was, and I wanted to see for myself. It's a combination of those two factors, I think. This movie was starring Al Pacino as Ricky Roma. You may have seen him in Serpico, Dog Day Afternoon, or The Godfather. The legendary Jack Lemmon played Shelley the Machine Levine, and you might have seen him in The Apartment, Some Like It Hot, or The China Syndrome. Alec Baldwin played Blake, which is curious because the character is not named in the movie. Like, there's a big story point where the characters are asking him his name, and he never shares his name and is more likely to insult you about what his name is instead of actually telling you his name. And you might have seen him in The Department, The Cooler, or Hunt for Red October, which we covered in episode 2. Alan Arkin played George Aronow, and you might have seen him in Argo, Edward Scissorhands, and I had actually talked about that on the March 30th episode on Movie Lovers Unite with John DiGregorio. He was also in Little Miss Sunshine. Ed Harris played Dave Moss. You might have seen him in Pollock, Apollo 13, or The Truman Show. I covered Apollo 13 in episode 112. Kevin Spacey played John Williamson. You might have seen him in LA Confidential, The Usual Suspects, or American Beauty. Jonathan Pryce played James Link. You might have seen him in The Two Popes, Brazil, or Tomorrow Never Dies. As you can see, this is an all-star cast. These are stellar actors that were chosen for this film. And all of them have an impressive list of movies behind them. They were stars before this film, and they continue to be stars afterward. Just looking at this list of actors should be attractive enough to get curious folks interested in this movie, which is one of the reasons I don't understand how this movie flopped so hard. It was directed by James Foley, and he's directed films such as 50 Shades Freed, 50 Shades Darker, Confidence, Two Bits, and The Corruptor. Except for the 50 Shades movies, I'm not all that familiar with his work. I've not heard of these other movies, and a lot of the things that he's directed are mostly for television. So it's not that he's a bad director. It's just, and this was, like I said, this is a great film, but it would seem that he was not as successful as the actors in this movie. It was written by David Mamet, and it was based on a play that he wrote. He's also written The Spanish Prisoner, State and Maine, Wag the Dog, Ronin, although he wrote that as Richard Weiss, and I believe he actually asked people to take his name off of the film, which is why you get Richard Weiss, because they changed the film so much from what he had intended. He also wrote Hoffa and The Untouchables. So these are all very stellar films that he wrote. He's written a bunch of plays, but these films are spectacular. The music was composed by James Newton Howard, and it's an interesting mix of jazz. There are also like songs from, they selected some songs from jazz musicians, and you really can't tell the difference between his composition and the jazz music that was in the soundtrack. It's kind of seamlessly integrated, at least to my ears, because I don't really listen to jazz. But he's also he's also composed music for King Kong from 2005, The Village, Signs, The Fugitive, and Raya and the Last Dragon. Speaking of the soundtrack, we have Blue Skies by Al Jarreau, written by Irving Berlin. Prelude to a Kiss by the Bill Holman Orchestra, written by Duke Ellington, Irving Mills, and Irving Gordon. Blue Lou by the Joe Rossisano Orchestra, featuring Lou Marini on alto saxophone, written by Donald Fagen. And Daydreaming by David Sanborn, written by Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn. And now that we've talked about the opening credits, let's go over to our favorite parts. The themes of this movie are varied. So one of the things I kind of picked up on was that self-identification, how people see themselves. And this specific story, you have a group of men and they see themselves as salesmen. It completely envelops how they see themselves versus how they interact with society at large. There's a very strong in-group versus the out-group dynamic. So there's an office setting, you have 4 salesmen, and you have the sales manager. And the salesmen have a very antagonistic relationship with the sales manager. And the two things with their relationship is that the sales manager is somewhat younger than the salesmen are. That's one thing. The second thing is that the sales managers apparently, or at least suspected by the other salesmen, the salesmen in the office, the one who actually are grinding, they don't believe that the sales manager has actually been on a sale, or what they call a sit. The sales manager has never actually sat down with somebody and talked to them and basically manipulated a person to buy anything, buy a property, buy a car, buy a home. They've never sat down with somebody on a sales talk. He's just somebody who's in the office managing them. And there's a certain resentment against him. They look at him as being part of the out group. There's something about integrity. And when I was doing some research and I looked at Wikipedia, they said that it has heavy themes of capitalism. And when I think about it, I guess you could say that sales is like the backbone of capitalism. It's like the step one of capitalism. Capitalism is like you have a product and there's somebody who needs a product and you trade that product for money. And that's capitalism in step one, in version 1. And I think it's really about the pressure that the capitalistic system puts on people. And that pressure can be so great that people engage in manipulation. They're pressured into unscrupulous dealings. They'll start playing fast and loose with the truth. So capitalism, the pressure of capitalism, especially like you're in sales and all of your money is coming off of commission, you could be pressured into doing some pretty unsavory things. And I'm definitely not a good capitalist. It's one of the things that I notice about the movie is that when these men are trying to sell their property, they're men selling property. And the funny thing is that when I'm looking at the title of the movie, I could not figure it out. The title is very intriguing. It's called Glengarry Glen Ross. It sounds like the name of a person, but it's funny sounding, right? The names don't sound right. They don't sound like they're in the right order. But as it turns out, I guess if you pay careful enough attention, you'll notice that what they're selling is property, and specifically property in Florida. One set of property is called the Glengarry Highlands, and another set of property is called Glen Ross Farms. So that's where you get Glengarry Glen Ross. apparently on the DVD or the liner for the VHS or the for the home market, it when you read it, it notes that the property is supposed to be worthless, and that's like background information. Now, whether or not the salesmen know that their property is worthless is unclear, but they do like make up stories about it. Like they have an entire skit that they kind of go through when they're talking to the prospective buyers of this property. And every salesman have their own skit. They have their own scheme they talk to. They're not fully honestly representing themselves. They're not going to call you and tell you that they're calling from a real estate office. They'll make up some story about being a sales manager or the owner of a property, or they're in town for a couple of days and they got an opportunity that you just gotta see. They're making up stories, and that's part of where the deception comes in. But when I first saw the film, that is not my takeaway. Was not that they were selling worthless property. It's just that property in and of itself, trying to sell property sight unseen, is selling anything is kind of hard. But when you're trying to sell, you're basically selling an idea of owning property, because the people that they're selling to, then they live in Chicago. They're not going to go to Florida to fly all the way down there and look at their property in person. So that's hard enough. But to sell property that's actually worthless, that's and you're knowingly doing that, that's horrible. That's some horrible stuff. And there are things that have actually happened. Like I've read instances of how people were tricked into buying property that was like underwater half of the year, or it's in the middle of swampland that's inaccessible to the person who actually bought it. And this is very disturbing. And I would rather believe that these guys are selling good property than to accept that the property that they're selling is worthless. I mean, that's just my own internal way of looking at the film, so that these characters come off as being sympathetic instead of being villains who deserve every bad thing that comes to them by selling worthless property. It's bad enough that they're making up stories about about themselves in order to sell this property. It's bad enough that they're manipulating people into buying property, but also that the property is worthless. That hurts me. It hurts me to think about it. In the film, none of this is evident. The only thing that is evident in the film is that they're trying to sell real estate. And that's it. They're not giving you any hints that there's anything wrong with the property. So I would prefer to think that there's nothing wrong with the property. Perhaps I'm fooled, but I'm just a spectator watching a movie. And it's kind of giving me some self-reflection. It seems like the best salesmen in this movie are the ones that come up with the best stories or the best fiction about themselves. And that was something that I could never do as a salesman. I had gotten to these types of sales like once or twice in my life. And that was the thing that I always had a problem with. Because as soon as I started making up stories, I felt dishonest, and I could not get past that dishonesty. One of the first sales jobs that I had was cold calling from a lead list, and I could not even call these people on a list of phone numbers I had. It felt hard, like just disturbing people out of the cold, out of the blue, out of nowhere. That was something I had a really hard time with. So I have a lot of respect for the people who can do it, but not enough respect for them to respect the fact that a lot of them are just making up stories and they're not being totally honest. I had a problem with that kind of dishonesty, which I suppose, could be one of the themes of the film. So in this film, over the course of 2 days, it's kind of peeking into the professional lives of these salesmen. All of them have different reasons to, different motivations they have, the different spiels that they have. They have, but they're all super pressured in order to make these sales. And one of the things you hear over and over in this movie are the leads, basically the list of prospective buyers, the leads that they're getting from the sales manager. They're complaining about because the leads are worthless. These are people. First of all, the leads are old. The second thing is that the leads are people that they've seen before, like they're seeing over and over again. Or they look at the names of the leads and it seems like they're the type of people that wouldn't or couldn't buy property, or they're just people who like talking to salesmen. They know that these leads are no good. They want new leads, but the sales manager is refusing to give them better leads. And this is like before the higher sales manager come in, the higher sales manager played by Alec Baldwin. At the end, he has a sales meeting. He tells them the contest, and the first prize is the Cadillac. Second prize is a steak knives. The third prize is that they get fired. So that the lowest selling person or the lowest performing salesperson on that team is going to get cut off, either person or people. So I guess if there are like two people and they're doing really low numbers, that both of them would get fired. So now they're even under more pressure to perform. At the end of the presentation, or near the end of the presentation, Blake has brand new leads. He calls them the Glengarry leads. These are new, more prestigious people. So he tells them that he's not going to give them these leads. These leads are for closers. And one of the earlier parts of the speech, like the monologue that I had recited in the beginning, or that I had read in the beginning, was actually part of a much longer monologue, and I just cut it down a bit. It's like one of the obvious choices, like when I'm always looking for a monologue from a film to do at the beginning of the episode. Sometimes I go for the obvious choice. There are a lot of great monologues in Glengarry Glen Ross, but a lot of them, they're all filled with incredibly profane language, and I didn't want to open up the show being too profane. Like there was a monologue that Al Pacino did that was pretty good, but the problem is that he talks about having sex with little girls. Like, no, I don't want to do that one. I don't want that. Is I don't think people will know what I'm doing if I open up with that monologue. So I chose the obvious one that opens with Alec Baldwin. Anyways, he has these special leads, and all the salesmen are clamoring for them. When Jack Lemmon's character, Shelley Levine, when he goes, like at the beginning of the movie, he's going to go and he's going to get some coffee, and Blake tells him, "Put that coffee down. Coffee is for closers." And it's like, that's one of my favorite parts. I mean, the acting in this movie is my favorite part. One of my favorite parts is Blake taking absolute command of the room. They know, or he knows that they don't know who he is. And he's basically going to establish dominance. The way he walks in, the way he looks at people, he's like a shark in the water. And so in order to get their respect and attention right away, he chooses Shelley Levine as a target. And that's when he says, "Put that coffee down. You think I'm fucking with you?" And then he tells them that, that in that particular month, if they don't perform well, they're going to get fired. And then he says, "Do I have your attention now?" It is impressive the way he commands the room, the way he dominates the room. the way he grabs their attention. He's not just getting their attention, but he's getting the audience attention as well. He's giving them the hard motivation. He's giving them the negative reinforcement. He is going to be the spark that gets them to work harder as though they had not already been working hard. And in the sales office, you have 4 distinct personalities. You have basically the hotshot, that's Ricky Roma, played by Al Pacino, the hotshot, top of the board salesman. Shelley Levine, played by Jack Lemmon, he is the former heavyweight champion of this office, and he's suffering from a bit of a slump. And he's convinced with every sale that that's going to end his slump. I feel like as a salesperson, he has the most elaborate stories to tell in order to sell his wares. You have Alan Arkin as George Aronow. He's more of a follower. And there's more on this character, the way it's portrayed by Alan Arkin, that I read in the trivia. But the gist of it is he is not as forceful as some of the other salesmen. As a matter of fact, you might say as a salesman, he is the weakest of the salesmen. If anybody's going to get cut off, or if anybody's going to lose this contest, the audience is led to believe it's going to be him. And then you have Ed Harris playing Dave Moss, and Dave Moss is it's almost like a conspiracy theorist, but all of his theories involved the office and the culture. And also, he's the most willing to engage in the most unscrupulous, even criminal activity in order to get ahead. It's almost like he's not even trying to get ahead. He's just trying to survive. And he's already, like, he's the one that's going around trying to talk people and engaging into criminal activity. And then you have the sales manager, who, all of these guys, they have very different personalities, but it's the sales manager that they all have contempt for. They can barely tolerate him being in the office, but they have to work with him. And that's John Williamson, played by Kevin Spacey. A lot of the cursing comes from them cursing at him. You also get a sense that even in this movie, every conversation is a sell. That every time, sometimes they're telling their war stories, but even when they're telling their war stories about what a great sale they're made, they're basically selling themselves as a great salesman. That they enjoy telling these stories. Or they're telling stories about how the leads are no good and how terrible the leads are. And these are stories that are meant to sell just how bad their situation is. And that is when they're talking to each other or when they're talking to the sales manager. And the sales manager is trying to sell them on the idea that the leads are good, they're just poor salesmen. And that's the same argument that Blake made. So the leads are it's not that the leads are bad, it's that they're bad at doing their job. So it's a lot of back and forth with them trying to sell each other on different ideas and concepts. It's a lot of these conversations that are my favorite parts. So, for example, a conversation between Shelley Levine and John Williamson, the sales manager, there's like after this big speech, Shelley works her hardest in trying to get Williamson to give him one of the leads. They've already got 2 leads from the old list, and they're supposed to get 2 more leads the next day. But Shelley really wants, they all want the good leads, the Glengarry leads. So Shelley is working the hardest to try to convince Williamson to give him 1 lead. Even makes an agreement where when he closes these leads, because he's convinced he's going to close the leads, then he's going to share his revenue. He's going to give Williamson something like, at first he says like 10%, then he works it up. He works it up to 50%. Like Shelley talks him up to 50%. And then Shelley says that he would give him the lead for $50. Now, $50 in 1992 would be about $120 today. So he says, I'll give you 2 leads and you can give me $50 per lead. And Shelley readily agrees to this. And it's like, there's a lot. Like, Shelley is, like, their office is closing up. Williamson is closing up the office. Shelley is following him around trying to convince him to give him one of the good Glengarry leads. Remember, Shelley has been on a slump. He hasn't really been selling as well as he had in his heyday. Shelley is also under pressure because he has a daughter that is in the hospital. You get glimpses of this throughout this first act of the movie. This movie is in like 2 acts. It takes place over 2 days. The first day is like raining all day. And it's in this time where you're seeing where he's calling his daughter, like but it's not like he's not like having a long conversation. He's either talking to the hospital or he's talking to his daughter. Just glimpses of this conversation over a telephone. So you don't even actually see his daughter. You just see his end of the conversation. So you know that he is under pressure in order to make sure that his daughter's taken care of. And that's part of the capitalism theme, right? Because obviously there's no free healthcare, and the healthcare this is 1990s, so the healthcare was way more affordable than it is today. And yet you have Shelley struggling. And so that's why he's trying to make this bargain with Williamson, trying to get a good enough lead so he can sell these properties. And so he's following Williamson around, desperate. It's like the desperation in Shelley. I felt that desperation myself. This is why I liked his performance so good. In different situations, not necessarily sales situations, but different situations where I found myself desperate. And you can feel that desperation off of Shelley. Shelley follows Williamson out into the rain, follows him into his car, still trying to make this deal, and where he would pay like $50 per lead. And Williamson finally agrees Shelley would share something like 50% of the commission. So now Shelley is set. But then Williamson says, okay, give it to me right now. And Shelley says, what? It's like, yes, give me the money right now and I'll go back into the office to go and get the good Glengarry leads. And that's where Shelley is stuck. It's like, well, I don't have it right now. How about $35? And it's like, and basically Williamson shuts him down. So now you have Shelley, he's basically out in the cold, so to speak. You know, he has to get out the car and he has to find a different way of trying to make these sales with these old leads that he believes are no good, but he's going to try to work them anyway. And the thing about it is, like, if you've already talked to these people, like one of the leads he's actually already talked to, and you've already talked to these people, then they're not going to want to continue to talk to him because they already kind of know what you're up to. Because like I said, Shelley is trying to create a story. So you actually see one of these sales calls where Shelley goes on and he talks to one of these leads, one of these prospective clients, and he goes to his home in the rain, and the guy actually lets him in, and Shelley had already talked to the guy's wife earlier, and the wife sent out the invitation, so that's why he's there. So he's not actually out there in the cold, but the wife is not there. So now he's only talking to a guy. And if you know anything about sales, especially when you're talking about large purchases, like something that's over $1,000, like the aforementioned Kirby vacuum cleaner, you can't just talk to, if it's a couple, if it's a married couple, even if it's like just a close partner, you can't just talk to one of the partners to make the sale. You have to talk to both of them. And unfortunately, only the husband is home. And the husband is already shutting him down on the sale. Like, he's like, well, I know you're trying to sell real estate. And Shelley's like, no, I'm not trying to sell you real estate. Like, the scheme is already broken, because the trick of it is, like, he's trying to get the guy to believe that buying the property is his idea. But the guy kind of already knows what the scoop is. He's already got a sense that Shelley is a salesman trying to sell something very expensive. And the guy's wife is not there. So the guy is not interested. And so Shelley basically loses that sale. There are different conversations like throughout this first act. One of the conversations you see is between Dave Moss and George Aronow. And these conversations, basically it's Dave complaining about the leads and the situations they're in. And you see them go out on sales calls, or at least you see they're teaming up to go to different people's houses, and how it's like, and then you see like the aftermath of their attempts to sell. They like busted out because the person refused to buy. And they've already got the idea that these leads are bad anyway. And so you see them throughout the film basically complaining about their situation, especially Dave Moss. And then Dave Moss throws out the idea of stealing the leads, like breaking in to the office and stealing the leads, making it look like a robbery. And then he already has this lined up to sell it to a rival realtor that is based just across the street from where they're at. And you can see that Dave Moss is really trying to manipulate Aronow. So Moss is like, the way he's talking is both intriguing and kind of annoying. Like the way the whole conversation is, like, I feel like the script is like masterfully written. Like it would be a joy to see this play. But at the same time, you can kind of see it's kind of annoying in a way that Moss is kind of like double talking, and you can see him working Aronow, like working him like a mark. And Aronow is like, he's like naive enough to fall for whatever, because Moss is a colleague. He doesn't think his colleague is going to work him, but that's exactly what Moss is doing. So he's basically manipulating and talking Aronow into breaking into the office. And then also even though he wants to steal the leads, like stealing the leads is his idea, but he doesn't want to do it himself. He's trying to convince Aronow that if he broke into the office, he would be the first suspect because he's the one that's complaining all the time. Well, on the other hand, Aronow, he doesn't complain as loudly. Like, he's basically quiet and he's kind of to himself. So he's trying to convince Aronow that nobody would suspect him. So it would have to be him. Like, they're not doing it as a team. Moss is going to be someplace else with an alibi. And he's trying to convince Aronow to break into the office and basically do all the work. And then he would bring the leads back to Moss. Moss would take the leads across the street to the rival realtor named Dave Graff. You don't see him, but you see the name is mentioned a lot. And then they would get like thousands of dollars for these leads. And plus, they would work for Moss to sell the leads. They would work the leads at the new agency. So that is Moss's plan. And George is very interested in this plan. You see him being convinced that this is the way to go. One of the most intriguing conversations that you see is basically it's Jonathan Pryce playing James Ling and Ricky Roma. So I said James Ling, but I think it's James Link. It's got a G in the name. It's kind of a weird spelling. But anyway, so like I said, Ricky Roma, he's the hotshot realtor. He's the star of the office. His name is at the top of the board. And he's talking to James Link. And I don't know if this is a conversation that had been planned. Like he had called Link on the phone and they agreed to meet at the bar. This is a bar that's near their office, and it's a bar that they go to all the time. So is this a appointment that they made together, or is this somebody that was just at the bar and Ricky Roma just started talking to the guy? It's kind of unclear to me, But anyway, you see them talking, and it almost, like, especially throughout the night, it almost looks like a date. And the technique that salesmen try to do is that they don't want you to think that they're selling you something. They're trying to get you to believe that buying the thing is their idea. And a lot of times it is. Like when I go online and especially if I'm on social media, and I might see some glasses, and I see some glasses is neat. If I click on it, that was definitely my idea, because I like glasses. I like stylish glasses. I especially like stylish glasses that are inexpensive. So I am clicking on the links. I'm going through all of the motions. I might go directly to buying the glasses. I bought a lot of stuff that way. I saw a water gun the other day, and I was like, oh, that's an electronic water gun. I haven't played with water gun in a while. I don't have a water gun right now. I don't know why I would want to buy a water gun, but this water gun looked great. And so I went on ahead and bought it. It's not a cheap water gun. It's electronic number. And so that's what salesmen try to do. They craft the conversation so that they're interested in buying something, and you just so happen to have that thing that they want to buy. That's what that's what Shelley Levine was doing with his first client. And he was trying to get into a conversation and make the conversation in a way that Shelley had an opportunity that the client, or not the client, but the prospective customer just had to have, and are willing to get it from him. Roma's technique is different. He's getting into this conversation with Ling, and the conversation is more about morality and if there is such a thing. And he's basically getting to a conversation with Ling that, and like I said, it looks like a date, because the conversation, it kind of looks like a dude trying to convince a girl to have sex. That's what it looks like. And not any old sex. It's almost like he's trying to get his girlfriend to engage, or get a girl at a bar that he knows has a girlfriend. Like they both are married to different people, and they're trying to gauge in an illicit affair. That's what it looks like. That's what this conversation looks like. That's what the language that Ricky Roma is using. And so he's talking about morality, like what is right and what is wrong. And when you see something, you should just, or if you want to do something, you should just do it. Like he's encouraging, the way the conversation is going is that you only live once, or the fear of missing out. These are the feelings that he's trying to engender in Link. But Link doesn't know that. Link, that's what it seems like to me. I don't think Link realized that he has been targeted as a customer. That's why I believe that this is kind of like a spontaneous thing that had happened in the restaurant. As I said, it's not clear how they met. It just seems that they just met up at the that Roma saw Link sitting down, and he just sat down beside him, and they just started having a conversation. So there's this whole thing about morality. It's like you see. You want this thing, maybe you should just take it. What's really morality? Is there a heaven or a hell? We're living on hell right here. If you want something, you should just take it. And then during this conversation, when he feels that he's got Link interested enough, he pulls out this brochure, and it's the Glengarry brochure for Glengarry Estates. It's just land. There's no actual buildings on it, but it looks like beautiful, pristine land in a sunny climate. And it's like, what is this? I don't know. I don't know what this is. What do you think? Something like that. It was like, I don't even think he asked him, what do you think? I think that if I can remember correctly, you don't want to ask somebody, what do they think? But he's crafting conversations like, I don't know what this is, but you should, you should do what you want. You don't get to see like the entire conversation, but you do get to see the aftermath of it. And the way that Roma is talking to Link, it's almost kind of creepy. It kind of gives you kind of bad vibes. And it's Ricky Roma's technique is fascinating. Like, you see why he's like the number one salesman, and at the same time, I also felt why I was a bad salesman, right? Why I could not do that, because if I were to engage in that conversation, it would feel dishonest. And it's almost like Ricky Roma and he's trying to, like I said, he's trying to engender the idea that there is no morality and you should just do what you want. The next day is chaos. Basically, this movie is divided into two acts. The first act is the day before, where it's raining all day. The second act is the day is a better day. It's bright, it's sunny, and the office is in chaos because somebody broke into the office and stole a bunch of stuff. So there are some contracts that are missing. There are the phones are missing for some reason. The apartment looks like it's been messed around a little bit, like some paperwork has been tossed around. But most importantly, the Glengarry leads are missing. The scene opens up. The salesmen are coming into the office one by one. There's police there, and the sales manager, Williamson, is there, and everybody's kind of frantic about the robbery and things being missing. I think the detective is already questioning Dave Moss. And the audience we already suspect that Dave Moss had something to do with it, because we saw him talking about it the night before. So the frantic chaos of the scene is also one of my favorite parts. Everybody's walking around, they're excited. A lot of them are just talking at the same time. And you hear over and over again, the leads, and also all of the profanity. So not that one half of the film has more profanity than the other, but there is more profane language directed at Williamson. Like, Williamson isn't directly accusing either of the salesmen of stealing the leads, but as a sales manager, he's gonna think that. So there's a lot of tension between the sales manager and the salesman, and there's a lot of cursing at him, at the sales manager, Williamson, is taking a lot of abuse from his salesman, as like he didn't have their respect before, and now what they think of him is below the toilet at this point. So there's a lot of fighting. The salesmen are incensed that the police would talk to them. Of course, they're going to be the number one suspects. At the very least, they're going to be witnesses. Shelley comes into this chaos, and he's like on a spiritual high. It's like he's on a high, like he just came from a church meeting, a thrilling fight, and where his boxer that he bet on had won, and that he took a line of cocaine. That's how high he is. And he's high because he made this incredible sale. So he sold like 8 pieces of property. I forgot how the property is divided, but he made something like $16,000 in one sale. It's incredible. It's like he was once the top salesman there, and it's like now it's like his streak is back. He got his mojo back, and that's why he is so high. He wants to tell everybody about the sale. He can't wait to go into the sales office and tell Williamson about this, that, so they can send the contract downtown or whatever. But then he realizes that the people are telling him that they've been robbed. They took the phones. They can't make any phone calls. The leads, the special leads are missing. He is observant of the things that is going on around him, but also he has this high of making the sale. The next person that comes into the office is Roma. Roma is also high because he has also made a sale, and he is is not the impressive 16,000 that Shelley made, but it's still a sale. This sale puts him on top of the board, and he comes in a braggadocious manner. Is like he wants his, or I think he might have even came in before Shelley, but he comes in and he talks about he wants his commission and he wants his Cadillac. He's like, he's like, but Williamson says, but we've been robbed. He's like, I don't care. I don't give a shit. That's your problem. I want my Cadillac. Don't give me your problems. And he has this attitude because that is the same attitude that the sales manager and Blake had towards the salespeople. It's like, I don't care about your problems. You go out and you close. And so Roma made a close. So he don't care about the problems that the office is having. He wants what's owed to him by making this sale. In the midst of all this chaos and this high of two guys coming in being happy about the sales that they made, one guy being upset, being interrogated by police, and police interrogating one person after another. Aaron now being the most incensed about the interrogation. He's called in to interrogate, and they don't like the questions you don't get to see the interrogation, but you can tell from their reaction. It's like they don't like the question that they're being asked, and it's almost like they're being humiliated by the police officer or the detective that's asking these questions. They're incensed about it. Moss is the most incensed, making the biggest deal about it, and being upset. He sees Shelley, and he and Shelley gets into an argument, like, because he's really disrespectful to Shelley. Like, Shelley had sold all of these properties, and Moss is like, fuck you and fuck your sales and all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of back and forth, and he's just, it's almost like he's just upset to be upset, and he won't allow Shelley to enjoy his victory of the sales that he made. In all of this, while it's cycling around, James Link comes in. James Link is that prospective client that Ricky Roma was talking to the previous night. And Ricky Roma knows immediately what this means. Like, he sees Link, like, outside, through the windows outside of the office, and is like, as Link is looking for the entrance to the office, Roma calls Shelley over, and they're going to scheme together, and Shelley's going to pretend to be a client that Roma is talking to. And then they cook up a signal where Shelley is going to convince Roma, is going to pretend that they had a previous meeting or that they had a previous engagement where Roma needs to take Shelley to the airport. He's going to take him to the airport, and then Roma's going to be out of town for a few days. And whatever Link needs to talk about, it was going to have to wait until Roma got back. Because Roma already knows that with Link showing up, Link wants to back out of the deal. And what Roma wants to do is to stall. So there's like a 3-day cooling period over which, when a person buys property, they can change their mind and they can get their money back. Roma knows this is like the only reason why Link would show up at the office was to try to get his money back. Because Link had given them a check. Like that previous night, like when he got the check, he went straight to the office because they were just across the street. He went to the office. They filled out the contract, probably at the restaurant. And Roma took that contract, put it in the office, and then went home to celebrate or whatever. You don't know exactly what happened. We're only getting out of context from all the conversations that's going on. And so this confrontation is another great part in the story where basically Shelley and Roma are trying to con Link into thinking that Link still had a few days. Like, we can talk about it when I get back. And you have we know you got 3 business days. And Link is talking about his wife didn't want to do the deal, and that, she's talking about calling the district attorney and stuff like that. And Roma's like, no, you don't have to do that. You still have a few days. He's trying to confuse Link about how many days that they have, because it doesn't count the weekend. It only counts business days. So it's like, yeah, you still got 3 days. The check hasn't been cashed yet, so the deal isn't done until the check is actually cashed. That is what Roma is trying to tell the Link. Now I don't know if this is true or not, but that is the idea that he's trying to give Link. It's like you still have 3 days. Let me go and talk to you. And it's like and Link is like, my wife don't even want me to talk to you. I just came here to get my check back. Just give me my check back. And apparently it had gone real bad with his wife. and Roma and like Shelly is trying to pretend to be the client that needs to get to the airport. It's like, well, Ricky, I gotta go. Come on, you gotta take me to the airport. And so they're trying to get this guy out of their office, basically. But Link is insistent. He's like, no, I really need that check back. And in spite of his agitated state, he knows that he can get his check back now. He knows that when Roma gets back from this fake vacation, that it'll be too late for him to back out of the deal. So he wants his check now. And then that's when Williamson comes out of the office. Williamson, for most of the time, he's in the office with the detective and with the client. And then the detective is asking for somebody else to interview. At first, he wants Roma. And then there's a lot of shouting. Then Shelly goes in and he's going to calm the officer down. But see, the thing about it is that with Shelly going into the office, it kind of messes up the whole scheme that Shelly and Roma was trying to cook up for Link, for this customer. And customer sees all this chaos going on. And that makes him even more nervous. That makes him even more ready to jump out of the deal. It's like all the shouting and excitement and stuff going on. And Williamson comes out and he sees that he recognized the name Link because it was on the contract. It was a thing that the first thing that Ricky Roma came in, he was talking about, what about the contracts? Did they steal my contract that I brought in last night? Did they steal the Link contract? Williamson was telling him, no, the Link contract is safe. It didn't get stolen. So that was the first thing that was said. That was the only thing that Ricky Roma was worried about. He was told that some of the other smaller contracts had been stolen. So he was like, well, he can go and he can close those contracts again. But the main contract he was concerned about was this Link contract. So that was earlier. That was when Roma first got into the office. Now you have the actual James Link in the office trying to get his money back. And then you had Williamson comes out. There's all this chaos, all this yelling. And Roma had already convinced Link that his check had not been cashed and that he could come back in a few days. He almost had Link believing that. And then when Williamson comes out, Williams says, oh yeah, Mr. Link, don't worry, your contract is downtown. The check has been cashed. And now Link was like, the check's been cashed? Because he was just trying to get his check back. If he could get his check back, then all would be good. But now Williamson's saying, oh yeah, we cashed your check. And now he's lost. So now Link is like, he's talking to Roma now. He's like, I'm sorry, I gotta go. I know I let you down. I'm sorry. I gotta go. I gotta go talk to my wife. I'm sorry about all of this. And Link books. He gets out of there. He gets out of the office. The sale is ruined. So now that's when Roma gets into it with Williamson. Like another one of the great conversations in this movie. And that's when he's like, you're here to help us. You're not here to fuck us up. And if you just spent a day in your life as a salesman, then you would know that you never open your mouth unless you know what the spot is or what the situation is. There's Williamson. They're trying to be the hero. And turns out he messed everything up because he's not a salesman. He doesn't know what he's doing. All he knows how to do is manage the paperwork and give out leads. And so there's another traumatic conversation where, like Shelley, he probably hates Williamson the most because Shelley is the oldest and the most experienced, and he was once where Roma was. And while other people, like the other salesmen, they understand that Shelley is kind of in a slump and that he's working his way back to superstar status. Williamson looks at Shelley as just an old guy who has basically lost his mojo. But Shelley is on a high. He has sold this fantastic property, and Shelley is basically gloating over Williamson, because now, like, the police had finished talking to Shelley, and now they're going to talk to Roma. And Shelley is gloating over basically how Williamson is like has this self-realization that he's in a position that he didn't earn. That was the other big thing about there is the other salesman resentment against Williamson. It's like it felt like he was in a position that he didn't earn. So he's going over this. Shelley is just like talking all of this stuff, and it's like, so you shouldn't lie about these things if you don't know what you're talking about. And that's when Williamson was like, "How did you know that I was lying?" What Williamson usually does is he takes that paperwork of all of the contracts that had been made that night, takes them to the bank so that the contracts can be processed. But he said that particular evening, it was the first time that he did not process the contract. He decided to go directly home to his kids, and he would process the contracts the next day. So the contracts were still in the office, but how would Shelley know this? How would Shelley know that the contracts were still in the office? How did you know, Shelley? You said that I lied about processing the contracts in the bank. How did you know I didn't process the contracts? It's the first time that I didn't do that. And now Shelley is kind of caught in a lie. And because the only way Shelley would know is if Shelley came in after Williamson left and did something. So that's when Williamson accuses Shelley of stealing the contracts. Shelley tried to say he didn't. But then when Williamson threatens to go to the police and tell the detective what he knows, that's when Shelley confesses. And he also confesses very easily. It doesn't take much. He confesses that Moss had put him up to it. So that was the interesting twist in this story. So it wasn't that Moss is able to convince Aaron now to do the thievery, because Aaron now is kind of like naive anyway. So Aaron now had apparently backed out. And so Moss had found somebody else. He found somebody even more desperate. He found Shelley. Shelley Levine, he was the one that went in, broke into the office, and made it look like a robbery by stealing all the phones and then also stealing some of the contracts. And with the main objective was to steal the leads. He stole the leads, gave it to Moss, and Moss sold it to the rival realtor. And they got paid that night. Like Shelley had thousands of dollars that night from that theft. And this is where Shelley goes from gloating to pleading, but it doesn't work because there's a lot of animosity between these two men. And then there's a point where Shelley is trying to, like, after being questioned by the police, Roma goes back to, there's a guy, he brings new phones to the office and he plugs them in, and Shelley he starts to go in and talk to the police just as Roma starts getting on the phone and starts calling up his other clients to try to close the contracts again that had been stolen. And you see George Aaron now, he gets on the phone and he starts talking. They're basically trying to get on with their business. And during a lot of this conversation, it was especially when Shelley was bragging about this property that he had sold. Roma had been praising him and had been even talking about partnering up with Levine so that he could learn from Levine, because he recognized what a great salesman Levine was. He was a great salesman in kind of a slump. He respects Levine, and it's this praise that it really, you can see how it glows. It's like gives Levine a kind of a glow of, especially of his glory days. And now he has to go to talk to police, and he wants to, in a way, while Roma is on the phone, Shelley wants to go over and kind of like apologize to Roma, because he knows he messed Roma over. It's like everything that happened is kind of his fault. Like Roma losing the contract. I mean, Link probably would have been able to cancel the contract anyway, but had there not been chaos in the office, Roma probably would have convinced the guy to come back that like a few days later, and by the time the guy came back, then the contract would have been processed, and Roma would have cooked up a story about how there was nothing he could do about it. It's already been signed. Now the guy's on the hook. It was a ruse. The ruse would have worked, but there was chaos in the office, and it was chaos in the office because Shelley had broke into the office the night before and stole these leads and basically messed everybody else up. So he kind of wanted to go over and say something to Roma before he talked to the police, because he knows the gig is pretty much up for him. And he would lose that respect that Roma had for him. He would lose everybody's respect. His name would be spat upon. He would no longer be known as the Machine. And he would be on the out group now. He would no longer be in that in group that he was a part of. Even he tells Williamson, as he was pleading with Williamson about not telling the police, that he was a salesman. He's not cut out to be a thief, but it's kind of too late. And the movie basically ends with the remaining salesmen just going about their jobs. You know, hello, Mr. Smith. I am from the agency, and I seen this great opportunity for you to look at, right? So, and that's how the film ends. So, fascinating movie, fantastic acting, is great music that was seamlessly blended in with the soundtrack, and they're also a fantastic script. This fascinating thing about the script, that there were parts of this script that were made just for the movie, like especially Blake's part was not in the play. That was something that they had added. They didn't add it for Alec Baldwin, but the writer had a chance to basically improve his play. Like a lot of plays, when they're, or like most adaptations, when they're adapted to movies, they have to be written differently sometimes for a movie audience. Even this play, I don't think needed to be rewritten specifically for a movie audience, but what the writer wanted to do was he wanted to make the salesman even more desperate. So he added the Blake scene and that character in order to fire them up even more, to put even more pressure on them. And it was fantastic. You know, you don't often get a chance to rewrite your story and present it to audiences, but he does. And I think apparently what happened is that now when you go to see revivals of Glengarry Glen Ross as a play, which you're going to see, oftentimes you won't see the original production. What you'll see is a production that mimics the movie now. Now you'll see that added scene with Blake, which wasn't in the play before. So, all very fascinating. And now that we've talked about our favorite part, let's go to the top 10 trivia. Obviously, I got this trivia from IMDb, and it starts off with this. During filming, members of the cast who weren't required to be on the set certain days would show up anyway to watch the other actors' performances. And that is to be expected. It's like, this film was like an actor's workshop, especially participating in this film. This is an actor's film. This is the type of film that actors want to be in to basically work their muscle. The single largest cost on the movie was for the rain effects throughout the first half of the film. When approached about the movie, David Mamet asked for $500,000 for the movie rights and another $500,000 to write the screenplay. Zupnik agreed, planning to bankroll the movie by cutting a deal with a cable company. However, no major company was interested in financing it because of the subject matter and abrasive language. It was ultimately financed by multiple small cable and video companies, a German television station, an Australian movie theater chain, several banks, and New Line Cinema. So there's that. I think it was a worthy investment, but apparently not enough. It may have something to do with the marketing, because as I said, I don't recall seeing any trailers for Glengarry Glen Ross. I feel like maybe if they had more marketing attached to the movie, then it would have succeeded, but I didn't do any research in this area, so I didn't know. And that they spent a lot of their budget on rain effects. That's also fascinating. It was heavy rain. Co-star Jack Lemmon said the cast was the greatest acting ensemble he had ever been a part of. This was also both director James Foley's and Alec Baldwin's favorite film of their own. And yeah, that as for James Foley, it's the best thing that he's done. Because the dialogue was so profane, they used a few of the most insulting words in American English. The actors referred to the film as Death of a Fucking Salesman. This is obviously a take on the famous play Death of a Salesman. David Mamet based his original play on his own experience working in a real estate office in the 1970s when he was a struggling playwright. He was the office manager who gave out sales leads and handled the paperwork. So David Mamet was Williamson. I don't know if he had the same attitude as Williamson did. I'm not sure if he had the same lack of respect that Williamson did, but he definitely had Williamson's job. I'm not sure if he's writing himself in a play, but it's a play that's based on his own experience. David Mamet's screenplay considerably expanded his script for the play, providing more context for the pressure placed on the salesman. Notably, Alec Baldwin's introductory speech was added, as well as Jack Lemmon's phone call to clients and the hospital, plus his sales call to the man with the fishing rod. Many consider the screenplay to be superior to the text for his Pulitzer-winning stage play. The film version is often transcribed to stage now, which I had mentioned earlier. David Mamet wrote the screenplay using the same style of precision dialogue he uses in his plays, known as Mamet speak. Characters speak in quick, rapid-fire succession, frequently cutting each other off, finishing each other's sentences, and repeating themselves whilst the others speak. Most notably, every word the character speaks or doesn't speak is actually scripted, including stammers, pauses, repeated words, half utterances, etc. Ad-libbing or improvising dialogue is never permitted. Mamet's writing style is also highly imitated by other writers. So there you go. So if you're watching a show and you have a lot of characters talking over each other, they're probably using the Mamet speak technique. Alan Arkin turned down the film twice because he thought Aaron now was a stupid, inherently unlikable character. Upon reconsideration, Arkin created a backstory for Aranau. He hadn't been a salesman very long. He was a teacher by trade, but the school in which he worked was shut down, and he needed to support his family. Arkin says that he played Aranau as an innocent rather than his usual stage-depicted version as a weak-willed bumbler. So that's interesting. And it's basically a decision that the actor made. He made a backstory for his character to make his character more palatable to play. The film had 3 weeks of rehearsals and was shot over 39 days. Most scenes were shot in single takes and then cut up in editing to try to replicate the theatrical flow and cadence of the dialogue. The film was also shot almost entirely in sequence, which would make sense since plays are always in sequence. Years later, in different play revivals of the production, 2 actors from the cast swapped parts on stage. Al Pacino played Shelley Levine, that's Jack Lemmon's character, and Sir Jonathan Pryce played Ricky Roma, Al Pacino's character. And that would have been interesting to see. I would have liked to see these 2 characters kind of switch around and see how other actors would play these other parts. And that's it for the trivia. Next, we're going to see what the critics thought. The critics have it at 95%. Audience and Popcorn Reader has 88% on Rotten Tomatoes. IMDb Reviews has it at 7.6 out of 10. Kathleen Meyer from Austin Chronicle wrote, Glengarry Glen Ross is interesting to watch, like well-performed gymnastic, but it never really connects. And I disagree because it connects with me, but perhaps I have some experiences that causes me to connect. Also, it's kind of a sausage fest, so I can kind of see that perspective. Rita Kempley from Washington Post wrote, Foley is adept at managing this intensely psychodramatic material. He is handling an ensemble cast with the combined power of a runaway locomotive. And that is accurate. It's one of the reasons I love this film. Desson Thompson from Washington Post wrote, though the performances are satisfying in a projected way, they're nullified by an uninspired atmosphere around them. Despite the colorful and witty utterances of its characters, Glengarry feels artificial and rarefied. And I don't know if I quite agree with that. Caffeinated Clint from Movie Hole wrote, a film more concerned with the performances and how well lines are delivered than the above-mentioned plot. And justifiably so, with each of the gifted performers giving nothing but their best here. In addition, it's probably David Mamet's best screen effort. And I agree that it's his best screen effort. And also that, like, the characters and the script and the lines are delivered are probably more important than the actual story. But I think that the story is important because you can have great acting, but the story is the backbone of whatever you're watching. And if you don't have a good story to hang these performances on, then it's all just going to fall flat. Finally, Glengarry Glen Ross is, at this recording, available on Amazon Prime. Join us next time as we check out a film that has a slightly lighter tone. It is a famous and time-honored sequel to a world-renowned story. But this particular film is not a direct sequel to any film. This movie stands on its own terms while continuing a famous story. It's a story of the Musketeers in 17th century France, and it's a follow-up of a tale regarding their challenge to the Cardinal in France. In that previous adventure, they sided with and rescued the young King of France from the power-hungry Cardinal. In this movie, the Musketeers are now forced to question their allegiance to that same king. This is the story of The Man in the Iron Mask. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter at Backlook Cinema. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at friends@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from your studio with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be empathetic, be kind, be helpful, be outstanding.